You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. In today's episode, we find out what happens when mental health meets parenting and how connection-based parenting can help. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. I'm really excited to introduce Crystal Haitsma to you. Parenting can be a huge source of stress and anxiety, and today we'll be talking about how to navigate the complex world of parenting while healing and nurturing your mental health. Crystal is a parenting coach and Canadian homeschooling mother of 4. She has spent years learning about connection, attachment, and parenting. And as a certified life coach, she combines coaching tools, mindset, and emotion work with connection-based parenting to heal our relationships with ourselves and up-level our parenting skills to have even better relationships with our children and leave a legacy and example for the future. In this episode, Crystal will explain a little bit about connection-based parenting and how it can help parents and even non-parents alike. Let's meet Crystal Haitsma. Hi, Crystal. It's so great to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because parenting is such an interesting space for holistic healing. So welcome to the Jōrni Podcast. And how are things in Canada today?
Thanks so much, Petra. Things are going well. It's warm and sunny, so it's a good day.
Oh, that's really amazing. We have a heat wave right now. So warm and sunny sounds better than really, really hot.
Yeah, it doesn't ever really get really, really hot where I'm at. So it's nice.
That's perfect. But at least you can enjoy the summer a little bit with some good weather. So that's good. Yeah. So I'm very excited to have you on the podcast today. And I was wondering if you can share a little bit about yourself and how you got to do what you do. And then we'll get into what you do just after that.
For sure. Yeah, thanks. It's an interesting story. I'll first of all tell what I do. I'm a parenting coach, a parenting life coach. And what I do is I combine kind of life coaching tools, mindset principles, emotional work, all of that kind of thing to help parents become the kind of parents that they really want to be and kind of break those generational patterns that have been passed down to us. And so it affects all areas of our life when we do this work, but it especially affects our parenting. And most of the time with parenting help and parenting books and courses, you're going to see like, go spend more time with your kids or try this catchphrase or do this thing, to get them to listen. And what I do is actually help women heal their relationships with themselves first, kind of dig up whatever those limiting beliefs are that maybe they've had, any kind of subconscious stuff that's going on there that's affecting how they want to be showing up as moms, and help them show up in the way that they want to, with confidence and with connection and with calm and with clarity.
That's really great. I can imagine that parenting can be quite the source of stress and anxiety. Especially if you have a number of children and maybe in the summertime too, when they're not going to school, or in the past few years, when there was COVID and you couldn't send them to school. So
Yep.
I could imagine that this would be quite the stressor point also for any kind of stress and anxiety that moms are going through. So when you
Yeah.
told me a little bit about what you do, and you said that you focus on connection-based parenting, is that something that you could explain to our listeners what that means and what
Yeah.
that would look like?
Yeah, totally. And I guess I should explain a little bit more about my origin story too, and kind of get into what connection-based parenting is from that lens.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
when I was parenting my teenager, at the time he was a toddler, my parents were still parenting. I have a large family, and so they were still at home parenting teens of their own. And they said, we didn't really love the way that we parented, and we think there's a better way. And here it is, and gave me my first kind of parenting book that I'd read. And at that time, it opened my mind up to this whole different kind of philosophy. There's lots of different names for it. Some people call it attachment parenting, conscious parenting, intentional parenting. But the gist is that the focus is more on connection, attachment, relationship, and less on trying to manipulate your child's behavior. In the past, it used to be like timeouts and spanks and rewards and punishments and all these things that were really just used to try and manipulate our kids' behavior so that they would act in the way that we want, instead of focusing more on relationship and just allowing them to grow into kind of who they are. And being able to mold and influence them also, for sure, but not focusing so much on manipulation or coercion of that behavior. So I started reading these books and loving how it was working. I just was like, this is amazing, and this is exactly what I want to do. But the actual implementation of that, when I would take it from the book and then try to do it in life, was so hard. I was fairly impatient with my own kids, and I just couldn't figure out how to actually be that kind of parent. And I felt like now my bar was set way higher than it had been in the past, and I felt like I was failing even more. And then throw in the mix there that I have some kids that are neurodivergent, which means they have some diagnoses that make them a little bit more maybe difficult, some behaviors a little bit more difficult to manage. And so that was kind of exacerbated everything as well. And so I found myself struggling to try to parent this child that was just a tricky child in the first place. And then I was overreacting, and then it would just kind of go back and forth like that all of the time. And it wasn't until I really started to turn inwards and notice my part in it. I really didn't see my part in it before. I really was just like, it's him and it's his struggles and he's hard. And, I need to change him, and I need to get him support. I need to get him therapy. I need to get him medication. I need to fix this problem that is him. And at the time, I think he was about 9. And this is one of the kids that I was dealing with. I should mention that I have 4 kids that I homeschool, so I'm with them all the time. So I totally get that stress of being with
Mhm.
your kids all the time. So at the time, he was 9, and I really felt like I was struggling with this. And it wasn't until I started to turn inwards and notice, how am I responding to him? What is my role in this relationship? How am I affecting and influencing his behavior here? And really started to slow down and kind of handle things differently. And at the time, I didn't really have words for it. This was before I had found life coaching. I had my degree in psychology, and so I knew things about it, and I'd read a lot about it, but I hadn't really gotten into kind of self healing, I guess, that much. And so, fast forward a year or two, things had changed. My behavior had changed hugely. As a result of that, his behavior changed hugely. The meltdowns that we saw were way less intense, way less frequent. He was a lot more agreeable. He was just doing so much better, and I was doing so much better. And that's when I started looking for a master's program, thinking I was going to be a therapist so I could help other parents with this, and then stumbled across life coaching. And I certified through a company called the Life Coach School, and I just love them, and I loved their philosophy and approach, and it really jived with kind of my experience and my transformation. And so I've been doing that ever since. So helping parents still in the way that I wanted to, but through life coaching instead of therapy.
I think that's a great combination of life coaching and therapy when it comes to parenting. And I mean, also in a lot of other spaces of holistic healing, because life coaching has sort of a unique way of looking at certain things that is
Yeah.
different from other holistic healing modalities. So I actually
Mhm.
think that's a fantastic combination. And I could imagine that the clients that you work with, and also, some of the listeners on the podcast, that they have challenges as parents, as everyone does, and that it could also be quite hard, as you explained, to find this new way of parenting where all of a sudden, you feel like, oh, I can't do this, or I'm never going to get there. So, is this something that you deal with also when you take on clients and they come to you with any kind of concerns like that?
Yeah, I think there's a few different concerns people come with. I think one would be not confident in their approach. So maybe they already know about this kind of parenting modality. I think most of my clients do actually. They feel like it really resonates with them. They really want to parent in a different way than what they were parented and how their parents were parented. And they kind of understand intuitively what that way is, but they struggle to actually implement it because they feel, triggered by their kids' behavior. Sometimes emotional reactivity is a problem. Sometimes it's like kind of the opposite of emotional reactivity, where we kind of just shut down and withdraw because we don't, we're feeling too stressed. Sometimes people feel like they are kind of lost in their motherhood, trying to figure out who they are and what they believe and who they want to be outside of their role as mother, and also outside of these kind of societal roles and pressures that we put on ourselves of how we should be and how we should be living our life. And because this kind of parenting is not traditional and it's really not mainstream yet, it's not the norm, it kind of can bring up a lot of those issues. Because if we're parenting this way and then maybe we go to the park and we feel judged by the other parents there because we're, dealing with our kids in a totally different way, and people feel like maybe we're doing it, our kids are going to be too entitled, or we're being too relaxed or too permissive with them, it can kind of bring up our own mindset stuff, right? So there's some stuff there also in just becoming confident in your parenting approach, and then also intuitive, like tapping into your own parenting gut instinct that we all have, and listening to that more and trusting that more, as like our own source of knowledge. So there's kind of a bunch of different things that people could come with, but it really boils down to um, uncovering maybe those past, some people call them wounds or triggers, but kind of those past beliefs that we've been carrying around that might be affecting how we're showing up right now.
And I guess that also includes anyone dealing with their own inner child healing and things that's coming up,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, from their childhood or possibly in their
Mm-hmm.
culture, depending on where they grew up and how they were parented, and bringing that forward into their parenting. Now,
Yeah.
who do you usually work with? Do you work with family sort of as a unit, or do you find that it's, the mother that kind of connects with you or the father that connects with you, or do you actually work with the whole family unit together?
Yeah, I find it really helpful to work with the parents and not the kids. I think that when we view our children as the problem and we think it's our children that need to change, then we go and get our children the support. So we go, find ways for them to get therapy so that they can learn how to learn social skills or not be so dysregulated or be more confident or whatever. But the problem with that is that it's families are kind of a top down approach. Like our kids are constantly learning from us, and they're learning from us through our example, way more than what we say or books we read to them. They're learning from who we actually are, like intrinsically our being. And so if we aren't doing anything to change that, and we're, focusing on our kids as the problem, we're not really looking inwards to see our role and our influence there. And so I work with parents, either moms or couples. I've worked with a couple dads also, just individually, but typically it's usually moms or couples. And they'll kind of come to me and say, these are the things we're dealing with in parenting. And we kind of map out a plan to get them there. But honestly, we think it's going to be so specific, like tell me how to deal with this one specific issue with my child, but it's so much deeper than that. It's like, why is that even an issue? Where did that issue come from for us? Why is it bothering us so much, and what does that dig up for us? And those wounds that we've been talking about, it's kind of like healing that. It's kind of doing that, what people call inner child healing, so that we don't feel so triggered. And the amazing thing is that it affects every area of our life. Like, you don't have to be a mom for this to be helpful. In fact, I've had several clients that were not moms, because we can feel triggered by our clients. We can feel triggered by a new business that we're running. We can feel triggered by our neighbors, or by a text somebody sends, or somebody in community or at church. And any time that we're feeling triggered, it's really showing us something inside of us that's kind of an unhealed part of us. Like there's some reason that that's bothering us. And when we view it as more information, like, okay, that's my brain and my body giving me information that there's something still there, that's maybe a little bit more raw, and we can dig into what that is and do the healing there that's necessary. Then it impacts all of those things, right? It impacts our work relationships and our family relationships and our community relationships. All of those things will naturally be healed as we do that healing inside of us.
So this feels like a really holistic approach, not just to parenting, but really also to a whole life attitude and how people actually look at life and their relationships, as you said, with different work colleagues, with the family unit, with anything really in their lives. And I could imagine that this kind of healing process could really help women who are also struggling maybe with low mood or anxiety and stress,
Mhm.
and maybe that's not just coming from parenting, could be coming from other areas in life as well. And then actually finding that connection with your children and having a very balanced and fulfilling strategy for parenting could be very helpful for anyone's mental health issues as well, to help
Mhm.
heal that. And so in your sessions and programs, obviously you start by working with the parents on some of the things that come up for them. So
Mhm.
do you find that that then kind of trickles down and it helps them feel better, more centered in themselves, and more confident to take on this whole parenting thing?
Yeah, so we definitely talk about the issues that they're facing in parenting, but then we focus the whole thing inwards. So for the first while of the program, we actually talk about us. And so we're going to be talking about things like confidence. So how confident are you in your parenting? How trusting of yourself are you in following through or in believing that you have the answer for your child? Or how much self doubt is there? Or when you do feel triggered by people around you, what's underneath that, like what's going on there. So a lot of it is healing what I call self-concept, which is like our own relationship with ourselves. We all have relationships with everyone around us, including us. It's how we think about ourselves and how we treat ourselves. So it's really digging into that. How are we treating ourselves? How well are we taking care of ourselves? In what ways are we caring for ourselves? And more than just like the fluffy kind of self-care words that we talk about, like eating chocolate and getting manicures, but like what is actually fueling us? What do we feel passionate about? What lights us up? Who are we? Outside of all of our roles, besides just mothers, we have lots of different roles also. And who are we intrinsically? And when we kind of do that really, like you mentioned, holistic way of approaching everything, um, we find that parenting gets better anyways. That as we focus on how we speak to ourselves in our mind. So I do what's called causal coaching. So a lot of it is mindset. So it's uncovering the thoughts that I have about myself, the beliefs that I hold about me and my parenting and others around me, but more importantly than anything else, me, because I'm kind of the key factor in all those relationships, right? I'm the common denominator in my relationship with everybody else. There's always me. So if I can have the power to change me first, then the other relationships will naturally improve. If I'm improving my relationship with myself. So I really help people dig into a super healthy relationship with themselves, getting rid of things like people pleasing or perfectionism, lowering our expectations of ourselves, taking better care of ourselves, having more healthy thinking about us and about failure. And when we can heal all of those things, then there's just not a lot of changes that need to happen in our parenting, because we'll notice that we'll be less reactive naturally, that we'll be more confident, that we'll be more self-trusting. And it really is a very intuitive approach. Once we get to a healed space, I find that people just kind of naturally parent in a connection-based way.
Hmm, that's really great. I could definitely see how being told that it starts with you might trigger some people because it
Mhm.
makes them think that maybe they're bad parents or there's something
Mhm.
they did wrong. So now we have to look at ourselves and see what the heck is going on. So I could definitely see that that might bristle some people. And how do you work with that when people are probably initially a little bit resistant, or they're maybe even afraid or ashamed or feel guilty because, as soon as we take responsibility for something, there is that inevitable thought of, oh, I failed something, I did something wrong. So
Mhm.
how do you deal with that in your
Well,
coaching?
it's not our fault. It's totally not. We were not ever parented this way. It's not our parents' fault. They weren't parented this way either. I think of it as like an evolution. All of the generations up until where we are now have given us what we needed in order for this generation and the generations coming up to be that change. And so I think we've been doing the best that we could with all of the knowledge that we had, and that perfection isn't the goal. Perfection in parenting isn't the goal ever. And so I think it's accepting where we are, accepting that sometimes we don't love how we show up as parents, and also accepting that our kids are their own little human beings, that not everything we do impacts them, that that parenting is tough, that it's a difficult thing to understand, and it's a difficult thing to kind of figure out for ourselves. and to just have so much more compassion for ourselves. And that's actually the number one key that I teach is compassion for us. And that as we can find that place inside of ourselves, that fountain of compassion that we can have for ourselves, it will spill over, just like a fountain would, to all of the other people in our life. That'll be so much easier to find compassion for others. So the first step is really realizing I actually am doing my best. And sometimes my best looks like, feeding my kids cereal for dinner, or letting them sit in pajamas all day and watch TV. Or sometimes it's me yelling, or sometimes it's me, not being confident in my approach and feeling judged by other people. Like, that's where I'm at. And I can choose to grow and I can choose to change if I want, but I'm just accepting where I'm at first before
Mhm.
we try to kind of move on from that. So it's not like all my kids' problems are my fault, because they're totally not. Your kid's going to have those problems regardless. Other people are going to trigger them, or, they're going
Yeah.
to learn it from teachers at school. Like, they're they're just little sponges that are learning from everybody around them. So it's not that it's us making them that way. We definitely have influence on them, but it's helping them to learn and to grow, through who we are, and through that influence that we have, and just taking a little bit more control over our influence.
And I think you touched on something really important there as well, is that the sense of if a parent is fulfilled and a parent is whole and they feel like their cup is full, they're also better able to then pass on that compassion, gratitude, love, all of that to their children. Because I guess we've all been there in situations, days that we're really tired, we're run down, there was a lot of work stress or school stress or whatever we're going through. And when our own cups are not full, it's really hard to actually be sort of in the moment and pass that on to the people around us. So, this work that you're doing, where you're working with the parents first and you're making sure that their traumas are sort of being addressed first so they can be whole, I think that's a really important step, actually, in order to come to this connection based parenting, because if you're not feeling fulfilled and you're not feeling whole, I think that would be a very, very difficult thing to achieve.
I think it's impossible. Yeah, it's like you're gritting your teeth and trying to do it out of force, right? And so when you're like, one common tactic that I hear people give is they're like, okay, if you want to be, parenting in this way, spend more one-on-one time with your kids. So they're like, maybe they have 3 kids and they're like, I'm going to go spend 20 minutes each day with each kid. But they're doing it out of expectation. They're doing it out of obligation. They're doing it because they feel like that's what they should be doing, or some person told them that that's what they should be doing. And maybe they're not enjoying it. Maybe they're burnt out. Maybe they're stressed out. Maybe there's no connection time happening there, but they're like, I'm going to check this box because somebody told me to. That's not actually helping anybody. That's not helping our relationship. That's not helping our connection. It's not even going to be supportive for us. But if we can instead dig into, like, what's blocking my connection with my child right now? And even more than that, what's blocking my connection with myself? Because we don't need experts to tell us how to live our life, or research to tell us what we should be doing. But if we can clear our mind from kind of all of these things that are blocking us or bogging us down, so that we have this clear path to our own inner knowledge and our own inner wisdom, and tune into that more, in really all areas of our life, everything would change.
Mhm. And I think that's where, how we were talking before about the life coaching. I think this is where the life coaching actually fits in so well, because a lot of the life coaching is very like solution focused and action focused. So, although we do deal with the past in a way that we try to understand how it's affecting us now, I think the life coaching has a very strong focus on, how do we move on from here? And what kind of actions do we take now to move forward to get to the point where we want to be? And I find that that's a very effective way to work with a lot of the holistic healing modalities, is to actually be very solution oriented and to look forward to how do we get to where we want to be. So that
Mhm.
seems to me like that's a great combination, to put the life coaching with the connection based parenting, so that the parents are in essence healing, but they're also moving forward to the point and to being the parents that they want to be.
Yeah, and I think that my coaching is probably a little bit less action based than that, but we do kind of map out a plan, like where do we want to be? And then how we get there is actually through changing that self concept, is through changing, maybe our expectations, how we view ourselves, how we view others. And as we kind of dig into that more mindset coaching, that those solutions that we're looking for naturally come. And that's what I love so much about mindset coaching. And I've kind of brought in a few other kind of things within that. I usually do some meditation and some more calming, self-regulation techniques, and kind of combine it all. So I think in general, coaching can be a really holistic process in and of itself.
And it sounds like the parents are going to be learning a lot of tools that they can be using on an ongoing basis. So even in the future, when they feel maybe
Mhm.
they are kind of not where they want to be, or they're hitting a wall a little bit, or feeling a bit stressed out, then you have taught them some ways and some tools that they can use to actually come back to that connection based parenting, which is
Yeah.
great because, the saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So
Mhm.
teaching people things that they can use to actually heal themselves and to then utilize those going forward, I find that that's a lot more effective than just telling somebody what to do and then they don't know what to do with that going forward.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I find that I usually work with people for, 3 to 4 months, and I find that that's usually enough time to do kind of that healing. Sometimes it'll be a little bit longer than that, but for the most part, that's kind of it, because then they have those tools that they can go back to and work through. And once they have a better self-concept and things are going better, they're feeling more trusting of themselves and more confident and speaking to themselves in their brain a little bit more kindly, and have kind of started on that healing process, that they kind of have that path to continue that in lots of different areas of their lives.
Mhm. And that sounds like something that everybody should be doing, not just if you have children.
Oh,
Everybody should be
totally.
doing that.
Totally. Some of my favorite clients have been ones with no kids, because it really is just doing that healing that's necessary for every one of us. And once we do that healing, it really does heal so many other things, just not only our parent-child relationship.
Mhm. And when you work with your clients, how do you work with them? Do you only do in-person work or do you offer online work for them as well?
Yeah, I actually right now only do online. So my clients are all around the world. I have clients in Europe, and I've worked with people in Australia and all across North America. I find that awesome just because I'm able to interact with people no matter where they are. And I find it just as effective. I love doing in person stuff, and I'm hoping now that the world is a little bit more open that I'll be able to eventually do some in person retreats and stuff, but that's kind of on my future list. For now, I work with people in small groups, and I work with them one on one, and we do it all online.
That's one of the amazing things that has come out of this pandemic is I think that we have found this great offering of services that are now available online. Whereas
Mhm.
a few years ago, most of these things weren't put online. And so I actually, that's one of the good things that came out of this whole situation is that people now have access from literally anywhere in the world to work with you. And I think that's
Mhm.
fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I really do think there's an amazing energy working in person too. I think that's great, and I think that we need that also. And
Mhm.
so I hope to be able to facilitate that also eventually. But um, like I said, I homeschool my kids, and I have 4 of them. And so, and I, have a podcast and do Instagram marketing and all the things. So it's kind of balancing different things at different points in life. But I really do hope to do something in person. And for now, I find that small groups and one-on-one is really effective. And if you're really interested in getting that change and feel like you are willing to put the time into doing that work every day as we work together, it really does work for every single person. Like if the person decides to show up for themselves to do this, it works every time. Like I've never had a one-on-one client who wasn't able to get even more than what they hoped for by the end of it, because inner healing really is the key to everything, right? Maybe we end up talking about business later, or relationship with our in-laws, or this pesky neighbor that we have or something, but we're able to, when we dig into the root cause, which is our mindset, which is our emotions, which is kind of thinking about it in a holistic way, there's so much more going on than what's on the surface. And when we can dig into below the surface, then it changes the whole landscape.
So the first thing they have to do is just take that first step and connect
Mhm.
and be ready and open to work on themselves.
Yeah.
So, as Crystal just mentioned, she has her own podcast called the Freedom Moms Podcast. So, you
Mhm.
can listen in from your favorite podcast provider.
Yeah.
And we'll be linking to all of Crystal's offerings in the show notes as well, so that if you feel aligned with this episode or you feel like you'd like to have a chat with Crystal, then you can see how to connect with her.
Yeah.
And before we close off this episode, is there anything that you'd like to leave our listeners with? A little piece of wisdom, a nugget, anything that you'd like to tell them?
Yeah. I think that the piece of wisdom that I love leaving people with is um, we tie our self-worth and our value into so many things. How we're doing as moms, how we're doing as business owners, how much we get done in a day, how much money we're making, what kind of car we drive, like all of these external things. When self-worth is really internal and it's inherent and it doesn't change. And what I mean by that is in any area of your life that you feel like you're deficient or you're lacking in or you're not enough in, that's what I mean by when we're looking at self-worth. It's those areas that we feel like we're not doing enough or we should be doing more in. And so I think my last little bit of wisdom is just to um, focus on your own inherent value, that you are enough regardless of how much you get done in a week, regardless of what job you have, regardless of if you have kids or you don't, or how many kids you have, or how well your kids are doing. That none of that ties into you being enough. And if you can focus more energy and more light and more love and more compassion onto you and to believing that you truly are enough just as you are right now, that is the biggest thing that will change everything else in your life. So if I could leave one little bit of advice, it would be to work on that however you can, to just truly believe that you're enough right now.
That's a fantastic piece of advice because, a lot of people forget about that.
Mhm.
So I think that's great
Yeah.
to remind everyone about that and to really feel that you have everything that you need already within you, because people tend to kind of look on the outside, like you said, oh, if I just get this certificate or I can
Mhm.
just do this or get this promotion at work, I'll be much better.
Yeah.
And it just never works that way. Then you get there and there's something else. So
There's always something else.
yeah.
Mhm.
So looking
So we have
inside
to
you.
intentionally give that to ourselves, and I think we all need that reminder. I need that reminder all the time, and this is what I do for people. I think it's easy for our brain to kind of go back to the status quo even when we know it. So yeah,
Yeah,
just spending time
that's
sitting
true.
in that love and compassion for ourselves, and just noticing how that changes all the areas of your life.
Mhm. Yeah, so I hope that our listeners are going to spend some time today, maybe giving some gratitude, doing some positive affirmations, or just kind of
Mhm.
enjoying being themselves and thanking themselves for all the things they have already achieved.
Yeah.
So take that as our nugget today.
Mhm.
So, wow, this has been an incredible episode. And I really hope that our listeners have enjoyed the journey into connection based parenting as much as I have, because this was a completely new topic for me as well. And I think this would be a great thing to add to a holistic healing journey. So I really
Mhm.
hope that people enjoy this episode and they take away a little bit of wisdom from this and they connect with you. Maybe they want to work with you and start healing their wounds. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Petra. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on this episode. And I hope you enjoy the summer. And thank you
Yeah,
so
you
much for
too.
your time and take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please subscribe, share on social media, and leave us a review. And be sure to get your copy of our brand new ebook called Break Free. Sending you love and courage, and see you next week. Until then, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and the Jōrni blog.